Hey everyone, this is Pete, and welcome back for the final time to Atari A to Z Flashback, a series of explorations of the 150 games that make up Atari Flashback Classics for Nintendo Switch. Today's game is Yars Revenge, which is the last game in Atari Flashback Classics. It was a 1982 release from Atari developed by Howard Scott Warshaw, and it was Atari's best-selling original game for the Atari 2600. It began its life as a licensed port of Cinematronics arcade game Star Castle, but Warshaw figured that the Atari 2600's limitations would not make for a truly accurate port of Star Castle, so he decided to make something that was a bit like Star Castle but not quite identical. Although supposedly, more recently, 2600 programmers have figured out ways that they might be able to do a more accurate port of Star Castle, so if you have a look around you might be able to see some homebrew projects working on that sort of thing. Now, Warshaw was very fond of slipping hidden messages into his games and references and that sort of thing. So Yars Revenge is actually one big reference to Atari CEO at the time, Ray Kassar. So the fly-like Yar creatures that you control are Kassar's first name backwards, and the planet that they hail from, Razak, is a tweaked version of his family name, also reversed. Now, to get this through, Warshaw supposedly lied to a marketing employee that Ray Kassar had already approved this name, but swore them to secrecy in the process, knowing full well that this marketing employee would go back to all of their colleagues and immediately blab on the whole subject. So the entire marketing department was on side before Ray Kassar even heard of this game, and thus the name stuck. Yars Revenge is one of the most fondly regarded games on the Atari 2600, and it's a great way to finish off Atari Flashback Classics. So, let's go play Yars Revenge. Okay, welcome back to Atari Flashback Classics, and if you're watching this on the day of release, Merry Christmas 2021. We are finishing off Atari Flashback Classics today with Yars Revenge, commonly regarded as one of the best games on the Atari 2600, certainly one of the most popular. I believe I said it was Atari's most popular, best-selling original game on the Atari 2600. With good reason, because it's good fun. I mentioned last week that, personally speaking, I'm not a huge fan of it, but I respect what it's doing. I respect how good a game it is, and I respect how many people really love this game as well. So it's a fitting end to this series for sure. So, as always, for the last time, let's take a look at the manual. Yars Revenge, featuring 7 video games. History of the Yars. Incredible as it may seem, the Yars are actually descended from planet Earth's common housefly. You see, the Yars' early ancestors launched themselves into space by stowing away in a crate of food supplies on board an interstellar spaceship. The spaceship crashed, and when the radioactive dust settled, the flyers were the only survivors. But due to radioactive exposure, these flyers were transformed into magnificent creatures possessing superpowers. They called themselves Yars. The Yars populated planets 3, 4 and 5 in the Razak solar system. They established orderly and productive communities and for a while lived peacefully. Fortunately, the Yars had the foresight to prepare for the possibility of an enemy attack. They designed the powerful Zorlon cannon and were in the process of building it when the dreaded attack became a reality. Without warning, the ruthless warmongering Quotile attacked the Yars' 4th planet and totally destroyed it. Since that infamous day, the Yars' top priority has been to drive the Quotile from their midst before more planets and more Yars are lost. The Yars employ their strengths, their unfinished Zorlon cannon and their limited knowledge of the enemy to plan counterattacks. As a Yar recruit, you play a vital role in these counterattacks. Your mission is to learn the terminology and put it to good use by helping the Yars plan battle strategy and by participating as an expert warrior in these battles. So, the terminology that you need to learn in this game: the Yar is a fly simulator under direct user control. Energy Missile is a missile shot by Yar, and that removes cells. The Quotile is the laser-based-like object on the right side of the screen behind the shield. The shield is the energy shield protecting the Quotile, composed of cells. The cells are the elements of which the shield is composed. And the Destroyer Missile are guided missiles put out by the Quotile to destroy the Yars. Along with that, we've got the Zorlon Cannon, which is a pulsing, scintillating fireball. It appears on the left side of the screen and traverses the screen horizontally. The Swell, which is a whirling pinwheel fired by the Quotile to destroy Yars, and the Neutral Zone, which is a colourful and glittering path down the centre of the playfield. When in the zone, a Yar cannot operate fire commands and cannot be harmed by destroyer missiles. However, the Yar can be destroyed by a Swell in the zone. So, Yars Revenge, the objective of this is pretty much the same as in Yars Return that we saw last time around. So you have a Quotile who is behind a shield, and you have to blast your way through the shield and then hit the Quotile with your Zorlon cannon. And that's basically it. This manual makes it sound a lot more complicated than it actually is. So, game variations. We have Game 0, simpler version, a good choice for young children to play, featuring a slow destroy missile. Game 1 is the 2-player version of Game 0. Game 2 is the normal game, with 2 alternating shield configurations plus a destroyer missile and a swirl travelling at normal speed. Game 3 is 2-player Game 2. Game 4 features a Zorlon cannon that bounces off the shield. Okay, so when we looked at Yars Return last time, I wasn't sure if that was actually part of the original Yars Revenge. Turns out it is. So forget everything I said there. And then Ultimate Yars features some unusual twists that distinguish it from the other Yar games, as well as the bouncing Zorlon cannon. First, you must bounce the Yar against the left side of the screen to make the Zorlon cannon move. That's where I was going wrong with Ultimate Yars in Yars Return, because the manual for that didn't explain any of this. So first you must bounce the Yar against the left side of the screen to make the Zorlon cannon appear. Also, to make the cannon appear, you need 5 Trons. Trons are units of energy which you can collect at the following rate. Eat a cell from the shield is 1 Tron, touch the Quotile is 2 Trons, catch a Zorlon cannon shot after it bounces off the shield is 4 Trons. If a Yar bounces on the left side with less than 5 Trons, it will not get a shot, but it won't lose the Trons it has either. Each time a Yar is destroyed, it loses its Trons. Each Yar has a capacity of 255 Trons. If a Yar tries to take on more of that, it will short out and the Yar will lose all its Trons. The count of Trons is not displayed on the screen. Yar scouts understand the count instinctively. Of course they do. Okay. So, let's have a go. So, 1 player, cannon doesn't bounce. So, game number 2 is actually the default setting in this. So, let's play. 0 points, 4 lives, off we go. We shoot our way through the shield, shoot a path to the Quotile, get a few extra bonus points just by blasting out the shield completely. And fire off the Zorlon cannon and miss completely like I normally... Oh no! Like I normally do. I'm not very good at Yars Revenge, maybe that's why I don't like it all that much. There we go. Beautifully done. Right. So on to the second configuration of shield this time. Oops. Hit by the swell. Now one thing you might notice in this compared to Yars Return is that when you hit the shield with your bullets, it actually takes out more than just 1 block at a time. Which means that it's a bit... Oops. Which means that it's a bit quicker to actually shoot a path through to the Quotile. And that's especially obvious when you play against this arrangement here. You see it sort of shoots out a cross-shaped chunk from the shield. So it's much quicker to actually get through to the Quotile. That means that the game has a kind of different flow to it than Yars Return does. I don't know that I necessarily want to say that one is better than the other, although my first instinct when playing Yars Return was that I did feel like I was enjoying that a bit more than Yars Revenge. But it may just be that the slightly more frantic pace of Yars Revenge makes it feel a bit more challenging, because if you mess up in this, your whole game could be over very quickly. Whereas in Yars Return, it felt like you had to work harder, but also the enemy had to work quite a bit harder as well. And again, just like I pointed out in Yars Return, when the swirl is coming can be predicted by the colour that the Quotile is flashing. So there's a set sequence of colours that the Quotile cycles around. When it goes white, that's generally your signal to get out of the way, because it will go white, yellow, yellow, orange, and when it's orange, it will fire off the swirl. And that is a feature of the game that it's well worth familiarising yourself with, because the swirl is by far the thing most likely to kill you. Just simply because of its sheer speed. Now, supposedly, you'll notice how that the neutral zone in the middle and the explosions in this look quite glitchy. Now, supposedly the reason for that is that they are composed out of raw computer code. So what it's doing, basically, is making a graphical representation of what's going on inside the 2600 brain at the time, and using that to create a graphical effect, which is a very clever means of doing something without having to sort of explicitly design graphics for it. And that's one of the ways that this game would have been squeezed into. Oops. That's one of the ways that this game would have been squeezed into. I believe this was a 4K one. So yeah, 4K this game fits into. I mean, looking at it, you might think, well, obviously, but you know, it's still impressive that there is a fully functional game fit into that tiny amount of memory. Let's have another go at that basic mode first of all. Avoid the swirl. Ooh, that was a lucky shot. And you notice, unlike in Yars Return, there's only one destroyer missile in this. This one works though. Unlike the second one in Yars Return, which didn't. So the funny thing about that destroyer missile not working in Yars Return is that someone fixed it. Someone fixed it like a decade ago, but Atari has steadfastly refused to put it into the various releases of Yars Return that have been since then. So none of the Atari Flashback consoles have had that fix in there. This compilation doesn't have that fix in there. And so on. In some respects that's sort of understandable, because as we've joked about a few times on here, the Atari of today is certainly not the Atari of yesteryear in many ways. And despite the fact that since we started on this series, they've launched a new initiative called Atari XP, which is actually some official boxed releases of the Atari 2600 games that never got a release back in the day, like Aquaventure and Yars Return, and what's the other one? Saboteur, I think, is the other one. Although they're doing that, there's also just a distinct hint that maybe Atari doesn't know its own products as well as it perhaps could have, because when you look at the product page for Yars Return, for example, it is very clearly displaying a video of Yars Revenge instead. Now, yes, I know they're similar. Yes, I know one is a ROM hack of the other. But still. You would think they would know which product they were actually selling. Nothing surprises me when it comes to Atari anymore. I grew up owning and loving Atari computers, but also being all too familiar with what a colossal mess they made of everything beyond the Atari 2600. The Atari 2600 was their magnum opus, and pretty much everything after that they made a colossal mess of in one way or another. And part of that was down to things like Jack Trammell's takeover of it, and the various naughty things that some of the CEOs had done along the way. I know Ray Kassar, who this game was based on, as we've said, was supposedly in trouble for a few things that he shouldn't have been doing, and all sorts of things like that. But in some ways, it's amazing that Atari's legacy has survived as long as it has, with so many different owners. And the fact that we can still play these games today, we've still got access to official releases of these games today, many of which are like 40 years old or more. Kind of amazing when you think about it. So I guess we have to kind of respect the Atari name for that, if nothing else. But yeah, good lord. Anyway, one player, cannon bounces, game number 4. So this is the exact same game, with the only difference being that if you shoot the Zorlon cannon into the shield, it will bounce. And if you are Pete, you will wander directly into the path of the destroyer missile and kill yourself. Alright, so fire, and there we go. But you'll see it's the same arrangement of shields, the same destroyer missile, the same swirl, all the same. So the only difference is that you can't blow holes in the shield with the Zorlon cannon. You have to shoot or eat the shield. And then hit the Quotile with the Zorlon cannon after that. Wait, so watch out for the swell. Too low. Too high. See, there it bounced. You have to be careful not to hit yourself on the rebound then, I guess. This is a fun game. I think I've sort of been a bit harsh on this in the past. I mean, it is beloved with good reason. I think the reason I've historically sort of been a little bit resistant to it is that it does have a bit of a learning curve. It is quite difficult. It is quite unforgiving. But take just a bit of time to get to know it, and there's an enjoyable game to like here. I just wish that there were a few things it did slightly differently, like just the simple addition of a high score function would be really good, because that way it would make it more obvious. More obvious when you're improving and sort of trying to beat yourself and that sort of thing. But as is usually the case, the reason for that feature's absence is more than likely the fact that he would have taken up too much memory. Because the Atari 2600 did not have very much RAM. It had 128 bytes of RAM. And so that meant that everything you stored in the RAM was at an absolute premium. And so if you could avoid storing a large number in there, which you'd have to do if you were doing a high score, if you could avoid... Oh my god, that's going a bit fast now, isn't it? How the hell... I think we can safely say I've never got this far in Yars Revenge before, because I've never seen the destroyer missile moving that fast. That's a living nightmare. But making good use of the screen wrap is essential, I'd say. No, get away. Go away. Leave me alone. Leave me alone. I did it! I did it! I conquered that stage. Oh, get out of here. You're too fast. You're too fast and I don't like it. Oh, this is alarmingly intense. Stop it. Thank you. No, go away. Leave me alone. Leave me alone. Are you getting faster? You feel like you're getting faster, and I don't like it. I just want to destroy your master. It's quite simple. Damn it. 61,558. Okay, I can live with that. Alright, let's see if we can figure out Ultimate Yars then. So the trouble with Ultimate Yars is that it adds a whole bunch of game mechanics and doesn't give you any feedback on them. And so it's very easy to assume that you're doing something wrong. So like, we can eat our way through this. Or we can die, that's good too. So we can touch the quotile to get some trons, and if we move over to the left of the screen, that summons the Zorlon cannon. Oops. And I can shoot it right into my own ass. Alright, touch the thing. Touch the left. Fire! Missed. There we go. So again, aside from the Trons mechanic, which a bit of on-screen feedback would be really helpful with, this is essentially the same. Alright, give me my Zorlon cannon. Alright, not doing too badly here. Oops! Alright, and fire! Missed. Again? Yep. Ooh. No, 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 no. You can actually hit the swirl in mid-flight. Quite difficult to do. But if you can, there is actually an Easter egg in this game that allows you to see Howard Scott Warshaw's initials. Both forwards and backwards, which is supposed to be a reference to all of the backwards words that he put into the lore for Yars Revenge, and the references to Reikasar and so on. So like, I think what happens is you take out the swirl in mid-flight, and that produces a sort of graphical glitch on the screen, which is referred to as the Ghost of Yars. And if you position yourself correctly over the top of that, the game will end, and your score display will be replaced with the letters H, S, W, W, S, H. I discovered while putting together a feature for Retro Unite the other day that Howard Scott Warshaw has, I think it's an autobiography. Oh, there we go. There's the Ghost of Yars. And I got an achievement for that. Very nice. I failed to do the Easter egg though.
because I'm not 100% sure which part of the Yars sprite you're supposed to put over the top of the Ghost of Yars to make it work. Anyway, that's the basic principle behind it. Incidentally, if you were listening to the beautifully crafted lore behind Yars Revenge in the introduction to the manual, and you were thinking, I wonder if they did one of those terrible kid stuff records based on Yars Revenge. They did. They absolutely did. So, if you enjoyed the magnificent monstrosity that is the Missile Command album, and you want more, there's a Yars Revenge one as well. I believe there's also a Super Breakout one as well. You may remember that the 2600 version of Super Breakout has an absolutely ridiculous story about you being in your spaceship and encountering a deep space energy field or something like that. But yep, there's an album version of that as well. Oh, hit the thing! Actually, oh, we're into high-speed destroyer missile territory. Go away. Leave me alone. 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 Go away. I don't like it. I'm just trying to... Just trying to Zolon cannon your boss, that's all. Alright, go away, go away, go away. Go away. Go away. Go away. Go away. Master of Stealth. Did he just fire? Oh! He fired on the wrong color. That's rude. Oh! So later in the game he fires the swell more often. That's not very nice. 70,249 points on Ultimate Yars. That's not bad at all, considering I hadn't really played that game mode before. Anyway. Well, I think it's time for a little bit of reflection. A little bit of reflection, given that we have reached the end of all of this. All of this. All of this. Pretty impressive, huh? I am thrilled that we've got all the way through this, because I started this project thinking, this will just be a bit of fun, and maybe I'll make it through all of them, maybe I won't. But I thought it would be an interesting project to pursue. But now we're at the end. And as a result of this compilation and making this series, I feel like I've got a really good understanding and appreciation of what made early days Atari tick. Because there's such a diverse range of experiences across all these games, both the arcade games and the console games. There is such a huge range of different types of experience you could have, even on hardware as primitive as the Atari 2600 and the Atari 5200. It's plain to see why the Atari 2600 was such a big hit in particular. It's a shame the 5200 didn't match it, but that was sort of the beginning of the end for what I was talking about earlier. That was sort of the beginning of Atari going, well, we had this big success, how do we possibly follow that? And then promptly failing to follow that. But across all these games, you will see there's a massive variety of different experiences. There are people experimenting with new types of game. There are people trying to refine things that were created in the arcade. There are people who are trying to create simulations of other things. Now, every one of these is sort of had varying degrees of success. Some of these are not great games to play today, but they are fascinating to explore. They are fascinating to look back on and think, right, at some point, someone had to sit down and think, right, no one has made a video game adaptation of pinball before. No one has made a video game adaptation of chess before. No one has made baseball before. How do I do that? How do I do that? How do I make it in such a way that it's fun to play? How do I make it in such a way that with a simple controller that moves in 8 directions and has a single fire button, how do I make that work? And that's kind of astonishing to me. That's incredibly humbling to think that this medium that we all love so much today, it owes so much to the people who made these original games. It owes so much to these innovators and creators and visionaries in some cases. And this it's not an exaggeration. It's not an exaggeration. These people were there at the very dawn of the video game industry, and they were defining what it would mean to make video games. And a lot of the lessons are still being learned today. Some of them have sunk in better than others. And in more recent years, we've started to see people experimenting with things that they perhaps shouldn't be experimenting with. Things that aren't true to that original vision of what video games should be and what people liked about video games. But at the same time, there are still plenty of games that have learned and apply the lessons that these games taught. That these games from the very dawn of the industry, the things they had to say, the things that their creators had to show us, and that sort of thing. And it's just incredibly satisfying to feel like I've sort of gone through and I've studied each and every one of those now, and it feels good. I feel like I've got a good, solid understanding of what the early days of the industry were all about now, particularly from Atari's perspective. Obviously, there was a lot of other stuff going on at the time. There's things like the Intellivision and the ColecoVision and all of the other consoles that sprang up around the time, some of which disappeared without trace very quickly. But knowledge of what Atari was up to is fundamental to video game history. And this compilation is a great way of exploring that. No, it doesn't incorporate stuff that we probably should explore, like the Activision games on the Atari 2600, which likewise were a defining part of the early days of the industry. But just looking at what Atari put out themselves, incredible, absolutely incredible. And you have no idea how happy I am to finally reach the end of this. But anyway, we have reached the end. This is the end of Atari Flashback Classics and the end of Atari A to Z Flashback. So I hope you've enjoyed the 150 episodes of this series. Over the course of the series, I have learned a bit more about making videos, about presenting on camera and all that sort of thing. So I hope you've seen an improvement in my own work as we've gone through this as well. I hope you've learned some stuff, and I hope in some cases, I hope that you've learned to appreciate some of these games that you might have written off as lost causes before, or things that don't hold up well today, or that are too ugly to enjoy from a modern perspective and so on. I hope if you come away from this having seen just one game and thought, oh, maybe I should try that, then yeah, as far as I'm concerned, that's a success. That's a success. And I know that more than one person has reached out to me privately and said that they were very much enamored with a particular game in here, or a selection of games, or indeed the selection of games as a whole, and they've gone and picked up this game for themselves, which is great. I don't work for Atari. I have nothing to do with this compilation. I just thought it would be a fun project to take on, and for sure it was. So for the last time on this series day, I will just say, as always, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you again on another series.
Man has not always lived among the stars. There was a time, many centuries ago, when the race called humans lived only on one small blue planet. It is there, on the planet they call Earth, that our story begins. In the closing years of the 20th century, mankind began its greatest adventure, the exploration and eventual colonization of space. The development of fusion energy, which converts any matter into energy, allowed humans, for the first time, to venture out into the uncharted depths of space. The gigantic ship, which carried the brave astronauts aloft, was loaded with supplies for the long trip to the stars. The space officials knew that the crew would need plenty of food and water if they were to survive their long and dangerous mission. What the officials did not know, however, was that there were stowaways on board. Not that they especially wanted to be there. They had drifted in through the airlock and sat perched on the walls and instrument panels, gazing out at the flashing lights through multifaceted eyes. Their thin but powerful wings were folded back against their iridescent blue bodies, much as yours are now, my young friends. For you see, the stowaways were common houseflies, still found on the planet Earth. We owe these small creatures a great debt, for it is from these first small space travelers that we have all descended. They are our ancestors. This, fellow Yar warriors, is the great secret of our sacred past.